This is the PlayStation 5 Pro. It costs $700. It can't play physical games, but it can upscale the distant trees in Spider-Man 2. Sorry, is this thing on? I said, it can upscale the distant trees in Spider-Man 2. Yeah, that's what I thought. You see, this has all left me with one big burning question. Have we reached the peak of video game graphics? Because if you talk to a dirty, disgusting casual gamer, there's one thing they're always excited about when it comes to new video game consoles, and that is graphics. Spelled GRAFFIXXX. And it's all in caps. But I can't remember the last video game or console reveal I saw that properly took my breath away. But maybe that's because all games look breathtaking these days, which explains why I can't play more than 4 modern titles in a row without having to call an ambulance because I've become oxygen deficient. But I think it's fair to say that we all miss the era of huge leaps. From the simplicity of the NES to the detail of the SNES, the scope of the PS1 to the PS2, the mind-bending brilliance of the Wii U to the Switch. I mean, imagine going back and telling a Victorian child that you could play Dark Souls on a bus. You'd surely be burned as a witch. Or a pedo, because why are you going back in time to talk to kids? Like, we've all been talking about this, to be honest, and none of us are really comfortable with you using the time machine for that. Could you stop? Just stop talking to Victorian children. The first generation consisted mainly of home versions of Pong, a cube that's batted back and forth between 2 longer cubes with a scoreboard at the top. Simple, no frills, and somehow, more exciting than Starfield. Then enter the second generation with consoles like the Atari 2600 that allowed games to be about anything, not just Pong. But it was less about thinking outside the box and more about thinking inside the box, as the player character often was a box, a single pixel that required your imagination to help sell the experience, like in the seminal Adventure. My god, I tell you something, this is the best I've felt about my body image in years. But by the third generation, the NES has arrived and allows developers to assemble lots of these single pixels to create something resembling an actual character.
Whoa, nice graphics! I'd like to get my hands on that game.
And Nintendo used this to their advantage and created a whole host of mascots and characters that we're still talking about to this very day. Mario, Donkey Kong, Samus, Link, you name it, it started here on this 8-bit bad boy. The fourth generation introduced us to such consoles as the Super Nintendo and the Genesis, and it's here that the detail explodes. Now characters actually look like characters. Tim Allen from hit sitcom Home Improvement actually looks like Tim Allen from hit sitcom Home Improvement, although for some reason he's fighting dinosaurs here and not allegations of inappropriate behaviour. Strange. Then the 5th generation arrives, introducing the 3rd dimension, and it doesn't get much better than that. Here's hoping the PlayStation 6 introduces the 4th dimension, allowing you to control your place within time itself, and has to come with a health warning not to go back in time and become your own granddad. The 6th generation, though, while not as much of a dimensional breakthrough, is arguably the most satisfying leap. Sure, the 3D effects of the PlayStation 1 and N64 were mind-bending at the time, but there's no denying it was like trying to make adult experiences with leftover Amazon packages. So imagine what it was like when people saw that first footage of what the PS2 was capable of, displaying a polygonal model of a woman that actually looked like a woman. To be fair though, the majority of PlayStation owners had no real experience of being this close to a woman, so didn't really have the authority to tell us whether it was realistic or not. But still, very, very impressive. But the 7th generation, it's harder to tell what this generation can do because really, it doesn't look hugely different from what folk are playing at the moment. So what do you do when faced with insecurity? Well, you just bullshit, of course. Publishers and the media discover the meaning of the word hype and make sure everyone is thinking that this next generation of consoles is basically going to be the second coming in pixel form.
And now the time has come. You've waited long enough. I give you the future of gaming.
Games like Assassin's Creed drop, and while they look a bit nicer, they have all the depth of a puddle. A new problem starts to develop. Making games look very, very good takes a very, very long time. And in the case of Assassin's Creed, sometimes that leaves you with no time at all to add gameplay. The 7th generation ended up being the longest console generation yet at 8 years, and that was for a number of reasons. The 2008 financial crash left lots of consumers less likely to adopt new hardware, but also the rise of Xbox Live and internet connectivity meant that consoles could get firmware updates, improving performance and adding new features without actually having to replace the hardware itself. But inevitably, there's only so much you can do with an Xbox 360, and making it run Grand Theft Auto 5 was akin to digital elder abuse. So new hardware was unenthusiastically pushed out with the 8th generation. The Order 1886 was an early title that felt like the first game of the generation to really push the bar in terms of graphical fidelity. How did it play though? Well, one review puts it brutally and beautifully by saying it's a 2-for-1 offering, a boring movie, and a poorly designed game. And here we are, currently in the 9th generation, where games like Horizon Forbidden West, Alan Wake 2, and Demon's Souls look unbelievable, almost like you're looking in the mirror if you were a demon or had a soul. So of course, we haven't reached the peak of video game graphics. It may feel like we're plateauing, but place LA Noire beside Uncharted 4, beside, God forbid, Suicide Squad, and you can clearly see that there's a difference. But we went from this to this in the space of 2 years. And if you ask me, games like The Order 1886 and Batman Arkham Knight are almost 10 years old now and still rival some games released today. Graphics alone just aren't enough to sell a console these days. Case in point, the PlayStation 5 Pro and its beautifully rendered distant trees that I'll never be looking at in the first place. So maybe, God forbid, in the near future, companies might have to focus on their gameplay to sell their games, on crafting and creating unique interactive experiences that push the medium forward as being the only art form that allows you to properly get involved and interact with it, rather than the fact that these faces look like real faces. I am sick of looking at real faces. I look at real faces every single day in my life. I don't need it in my games. Mark my words, we are about a decade away from one of two options. One, you stream everything. There's no such thing as a console anymore. You just stream video games to anything with a screen and end up playing the brand new big AAA titles on the small screen on your air fryer. Or you have a magic AI graphics card that literally changes the visuals of any game with just a simple command prompt from yourself. And you'll go, launch Cyberpunk 8K hyper-realistic, but with no politics, please keep the politics out. And that graphics card will launch an 8K hyper-realistic blank screen. Those are your two options. Good night. Hey, thank you very much for watching, especially if you got all the way to the end. Look, have you bought a PS5 Pro? If so, do you like it? No hate. If I was a billionaire, I would buy one day one as well, but I'd say I think this is the most I've ever been underwhelmed with a new console, and I'm someone who bought a Wii U, so that's saying a lot.